Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this second day in a series of lectures on Chrome Guided Smile. If you were logging in early, you noticed that I was scrolling through our private Facebook page that is really just about Chrome Guided Smile, its surgeries, its components, its techniques, troubleshooting, that type of thing. We have about 630 members, maybe a little bit more. And it is private just for doctors and for staff. Now we don't have implant reps or really any other company, anyone else who really, we just kind of block everyone to keep it private because we have doctors share their experience, their surgeries, their successes, some of their failures, and we troubleshoot it. We talk our way through it and we use it as a sharing platform. So it's been alive for about 2 years, and there is an incredible amount of content on this page. So just click join. You'll find it. Just search on Chrome Guided Smile. You'll find it. There's only I believe one out there that has that full label, and we'll let you in, and you can learn all about Chrome. So my name is Alan Banks, and I work for Rowe Dental Laboratory, a laboratory that's located in Cleveland, Ohio. We're a full-service lab. We've been in business since the mid-1920s, one of the oldest laboratories in the country, but arguably one of the most progressive laboratories at least in North America. We're on the cutting edge of many different things on many different types of restorations, really in all departments. And just as an example, I think by the next month or maybe two, we'll be almost at 100% digital dentures, which I think is really a big leap for that product. That was really the last frontier of the digital environment. And we've been digital with crowns and partials and implant restorations for years now. I mean, even more than a decade, but dentures was the final frontier. So a bunch of products you see here. These are all products, most of them that really surround Chrome Guided Smile. There's some that don't, but for the most part, Chrome has brought a whole catalog of products along with it. We are proud to be the production facility behind Chrome. We work with Chrome for development, for rolling out new products. There are new products being developed literally every month that surround Chrome, that as far as advancements and even new product offerings. Guided Smile is the umbrella, and then all the products are underneath it. And we'll discuss some of those varying products as we go through these programs. So we are providing Chrome in all 50 states. We even have a partner in Ireland and a partner in Australia. And it's a very exciting venture for us. Yesterday's program was the records, and then today's program is going to be on the pin guide and the fixation base. So I always like to start with this video. Make sure the volume's up. It's a culmination of years of guided surgery technology wrapped up into one industry-leading full arch product. Developed in both a clinical and laboratory environment, Chrome delivers the doctor and patient a pre-planned service for bone reduction, osteotomy creation, implant and multi-unit abutment indexing, and an integrated nanoprosthetic. There are no comparable services in the world like Chrome. It's available for nearly all implant systems, offers full visualization during surgery, minimally invasive exposure, a fully pre-planned surgery with implant indexing, a beautifully crafted and integrated prosthetic, and a level of precision planning that is unique in the industry for implants, components, and prosthetics. Chrome delivers what is expected by the patient and the doctor every time, for every patient. After patient, after patient, after happy patient. It's time you try Chrome and its family of products and services for your next full arch surgery. Okay, so what is Chrome Guided Smile? And I'll go through these a little bit quicker as we move through the week. But Chrome Guided Smile is a pre-planned surgery that starts with a smile simulation and ends with a predictable method of delivering the final restoration. Chrome delivers bone reduction guidance, osteotomy guidance, implant control, abutment insertion, and a simplified prosthetic conversion and very simplified method of converting to the final restoration. Today's discussion is going to be surrounding just the pin guide and the fixation base for dentate and edentulous, and we'll do a little troubleshooting at the end. As mentioned yesterday on our website, roaddentallab.com, there is an area under Chrome GS, frequently asked questions. And for the pin guide, I think I showed this one yesterday, the pin guide may have a larger FAQ than a more expansive FAQ than any other product. Even though it's a very simple tool to use, you always want to have what happens if in an FAQ, and it's very extensive and very informative. So today, pin guide and fixation base. These two items are the beginning point of every Chrome guided smile surgery. The package of Chrome has several different components. It's a more simple system than a lot out there on the market, a lot less componentry, but every single case will involve the same components, and they all start with the pin guide and the fixation base. The pin guide is what delivers the metal, is what delivers the foundation of the surgery. The pin guide, in a dentate situation, rests on the teeth. It is fixated to the teeth and you can verify it through Windows. And once it's tried in, it's assembled to the metal is left behind, and the metal stays in the mouth during the rest of the surgery. The metal serves many purposes, but one is the leveling of the bone reduction. So anything above the fixation base is leveled, and the teeth and the bone are removed. So why Chrome? I added these slides in here recently because I really want to compare Chrome to other technologies out there in the world that are available. Chrome uses what we call floating guide technology. There are patents and patent pending surrounding this technology, but ultimately what it means is that the metal part of the Chrome system rests away from the bone. It floats. It never touches bone. And this is significant for full arch dentistry, full arch reconstruction cases that are guided, because the metal passes over or around malocclusion, over bony areas that don't have to be reduced. It can go over undercut, and it can go around basically any unpredictable bony surface. It's floating, never touches the bone. And this is very significant because, every full arch case that any lab works on, the first step they do is bone segmentation. And bone segmentation essentially takes the surface of the bone and renders it smooth. However, in our market and around the world, there are many CT scanners with different levels of radiation, different levels of bone and hard tissue capture. And so every CT scan is a little bit different. And to compound on that, the softwares that do the bone segmentation are different. And it's a person pushing the mouse. It's not automated. And so even from case to case with the same patient, from lab to lab or technician to technician, the surface of that bone is going to be different, which means that the other types of guides on the market that have to rest on bone are going to be different. They're going to vary, just simply based on the nature of bone segmentation not being the most predictable method of rendering a bone perfect to receive a guide. So floating guide technology, this works in dentate, in edentulous, really every case that we design, the metal is floating labial to the bone. So the two items, again, the purpose of the purpose of the pin guide is a few things. It ensures the case starts accurately. The pin guide is always going to fit onto the teeth perfectly. We'll talk a little bit about troubleshooting, but it's going to fit on the teeth. You may have to extract some teeth first. That'll be noted. Talk about that a little bit too. The pin guide delivers a fixation base. It can also help mark the tissue reflection, because the first step in any case is to seat the pin guide without the fixation base to make sure it fits, there's no rock, and then you can mark the extent, with a marker where the flap is going to end. So it helps with that. And then with edentulous cases, the pin guide verifies the bite, which is a really neat device that we invented. The fixation base, the metal, this is the foundation of the surgery. This gives us the bone reduction. It delivers the osteotomy guide, the prosthetic, the rapid appliance. Everything is based on this fixation base, and everything plugs into it throughout the surgery. And the fixation base remains in the mouth through the entire surgery, which is significant because many pinned systems that we've seen on the market, the pins have to be removed, while another product, part of the system, is installed. And then finding the holes, finding the trajectory can be very challenging. So it's nice to have the pins seated during the entire surgery. Now, Chrome is very precise, and we ask that the tools that we have developed be used in conjunction with Chrome. We developed specific pins and drills with the system. We have long and short. They are stainless steel. They are a specific length and width to match the software that we use. They are also designed to go transcortical, which we'll show in detail shortly. They also involve a long and a short many times in the same surgery, and they are strategically placed. So it's important to use the fixation kit, as we call it, whenever you complete a Chrome case. The earlier image, this image shows the pin that we currently use, and in development, this will be, it'll be a few months, but we have developed a new pin. A lot of the elements are the same. There's still a hole here for floss if you want to floss it to remove it or to make sure the patient doesn't swallow it. We have tapered the pin, the end of the pin, to be more pointed. We do that for a couple of reasons, primarily in the maxilla for soft bone, which we'll talk about. But the real development is in the drill, and the drill now will come standard with a step down. So the shank of the drill, the main body of the drill, will be 2 millimeters. The pins are 1.95 and the drill is 2.0. But the last 4 millimeters of the drill will be a step down to just 1.8. This is the part that goes into the cortical plate. Let me just quickly go through how this works with the pin guide and the fixation base. The pins are designed transcortical. So with every surgery plan, the pin obviously will go through the fixation base, but we design it to go all the way through the lingual cortex. And in the mandible, not quite as important. In fact, with the mandible, most of the time you would drill all the way through and bury the drill all the way to the end, because that's how we plan it. And then you would take a pin and you would place it and sometimes tap it in with a surgical mallet. In the maxilla, it can be a little bit different because of soft bone, but the plan is for transcortical. Sometimes they will emerge a little bit out of the lingual plate, and which is an advantage because that's how it wedges, especially with the new pin design with the step down. I believe this has. Pins are also strategically placed. In this cross section, you can see this case has 4 pins. The first pin is placed between this osteotomy site and this chrome lock. Often, when we are planning cases online, we cannot determine exact pin placement due to chrome lock placement. So sometimes during the online meeting, we will plan the pins with you, but often we don't. We plan the pins subsequent to the meeting. In this instance, we need to keep the separation between the 2 pins. This pin really could not go any more easier. And However, when we go too far distally in the mouth during surgery, it's difficult to get back here with instruments to remove and place, or if we use a surgical mallet. It's tough to do this if it's too far distally placed. Notice how the fixation base is never contacting bone. That's the situation. The pins, as mentioned earlier, are transcortical. And in this situation, you can see this pin came a little bit further because of the angulation of the bone. So that's basic pin placement and pin design. We can plan them live with you online, but most of the time we just don't. We do it after for like the reasons mentioned. But something interesting about pin placement, there was a period very early on where the pins were sometimes placed all in the same trajectory. Well, what happens there? You can just remove the entire fixation base by just pulling. We don't want that to happen. So that is why we use basically stabilizing through trajectory. They go at different angles. We are cautious about the pins not being placed too far distally. That can be a real problem if you're trying to push them in or tap them in. So we try to keep them a little bit more in the anterior, yet maintaining their divergency for stabilization. This is, I don't know, this might be chrome humor, but don't be stuck in this situation. In the top left here, you can see this is a drill. This is another drill. We've actually seen burr shanks used as substitutes. Indeed, it is a 2 millimeter drill, and the shank of burrs coincidentally are about 2 millimeters, and so are some most pilot drills out there on the market, and they will work in a pickle, but really want to use the proper tools and have a predictable result. The pins and drills come in a kit. We always ask the question when we're in the live online meeting, do you need a set of pins and drills? This kit comes with long and short drills and then 4 long and short pins. In fact, we have a shop on our website where you can order all of the, let me just pop out here real quick and show where it is. Go to the home page. Here's the shop, and then chair side essentials. And they can all be purchased here. This is not intended at all to be a salesy program, but that is where you would purchase your pins. But again, we ask in the online meeting pins and drills and the prosthetic conversion kit, which we will discuss tomorrow and the next day. So the pin guide and the fixation base, let's go through some details of it. Dentate, edentulous, double edentulous, and surgical discussion. We'll go through those parts today. So naming the parts of the fixation base. Do you have to know every single name? No, we're not going to quiz you on it, of course. But it is nice when we're communicating with you, vice versa, that we are speaking in the terms of Chrome. It really helps with clear communication. So the fixation pin site, that is the site where the pin goes in. That's the fixation site. We have the fixation pins. Those are the normal pins that we use. These are called Chrome locks. These blue, they used to be similar to a Swiss lock, but they are Chrome locks. This is our 5th generation. They work very well. They don't, we had a little issue with them pulling out a long time ago. That is not the case anymore. There's a mechanism inside that prevents them from, ejecting with a little bit of pressure. So the metal is made of, not really a key term, but it's made of selective laser melting. That's the technology. So everything we do is made in the computer with fancy software. And when we're done designing the metal, that file goes into a laser printer, and the laser hits a vat of chrome cobalt, and a couple hours later, our chrome products emerge. Pretty fascinating technology, which means it's also very accurate. Unlike casting, casting does not lead to the most accurate things. We know that from years of casting partials. Yes, it's a science, becoming kind of a lost science. So selected laser melting was really the only reason we could really move towards chrome. The plungers should fit passively with the chrome, with the pin guide. We test these materials. We have stages of quality control that these cases go through to make sure that there's a passive fit, that there's no movement between the two, and that that they are flush. So very important. Everything has to fit together like a puzzle so that the implants are in the right position. If you find that the plungers become a little bit sticky, that could be because it's been soaking a little bit too long in the office, or perhaps some other reasons, but some simple mineral oil will loosen them right up. But we find that plunging them in and out a few times will loosen them up perfectly. I didn't mention this part. If you find that there's a, perhaps the case, well, if you find that there's a little bit of tension between the plunger and the plastic, you can always just adjust the hole a little bit, just remove and make an adjustment. We made the locks blue so that they would not be inadvertently pulled out during the surgery, or so that you knew which was the pin and which was the blue. So pin guide inspection, when you receive the case, one of the things you inspect is that, of course, it fits the model, which it will. If it left our laboratory, it'll fit the model. But will it fit the teeth? Well, it certainly should if the records were perfect. Some doctors have the patient come in a day early, 2 days early, and just try to seat it. You may have to anesthetize the patient to do this. But if you're concerned at all about the records, or it's just part of your routine, have the patient in, seat it, adjust it a little bit, and then you know you're 100% ready to go for surgery. The edentulous patients, the pin guide fits just like their denture did. We'll go into a lot of detail about that. And the loop should also fit passively. Do not force the plunger, the chrome lock in. If it's being held up, adjust the plastic inside. You want to be very careful with that. You don't want them to break. And when you insert and remove the pin guide, you want to move them in a trajectory that's straight up and away from the fixation base, as opposed to rotating out. Don't rotate. Plastic is a little bit delicate. In the event that you do get breakage, you still can hold the pin guide to the fixation base manually. Not ideal. If you broke one of the loops, the other two would hold the case in firmly, but you would hold on to them manually. Another key point of the pin guide is that it's going to fit snugly on the teeth. We leave windows. I think I have some more images here. We leave occlusal windows to confirm that it's perfectly seated. You can see there's a gap here, and this is not seated. This is seated. You will find, because of undercut, that either on the lingual, sometimes the labial, but usually the lingual, there'll be a gap. That's okay. That is just a matter of passivity and seating. So what that means is that, in the mouth or on the model, probably not on the model, it's going to fit the model, but in the mouth, you would use that window to ensure that it's 100% seated. We make every effort to put windows around the arch so that you can check in the posterior and the anterior. And after this discussion over the past few minutes, you can see why it's so important to have very, very good, high quality master cast, master digital impressions that are just perfect. So we want no bubbles, voids, pulls, that type of thing. So please be careful with the casts. In this case, you can see on the lower, I think this is a maxillary case actually, so not quite as important, but we want it to be 100%. Sometimes the pin guide goes deep into the vestibule due to bone reduction. And so we want to be able to see all the tissue all the way to the roll. Very important. Right, and then voids. Actually, I'm pretty sure this was a double arch. And on that lower, on the lower, you could see there was a void in the lower anterior, and then the upper, there was no, there was the palate was missing from the scan. And if the palate's missing, we can't make a backup denture, right? So full roll. Imagine you're making an immediate denture and capture that impression for the pin guide's sake. So let's show the pin guide and the fixation base in action. And I just have just a couple notes here before I push play. If you're in soft bone in the maxilla, and you'll know from the first pin that goes in or the drill, if the drill just drops in, it was softer than expected. When you get to the next site, drill 2/3 of the way, and then use a surgical mallet and tap the pin in all the way until it's flush. There are techniques with using a surgical mallet. You do not want to keep hitting the pin as it is at the metal, because you don't want to move the fixation base. You just want to set the pin. But that is how you would treat very soft bone. Just don't drill all the way through. On the lingual, you can do a minimal flap initially, and then add more of a flap later. And then you reduce bone to the top of the guide, which we'll show you here in just a minute. So with every dentate case, the first step is to try the pin guide in. As long as it fits, then you remove it, and then you lay the labial flap. Once it's seated, you assemble. Let me hit pause here so we don't get a little too far ahead. Then you would assemble the pin guide and the fixation base outside of the mouth by plunging in the chrome locks. You'll see a couple of these videos are a little bit older, so they don't have the latest chrome locks on them. But you'll assemble it, seat it, and then, shoot, my apologies. All right, labial flap, assemble the two together, deliver, and then hold the pin guide firmly in place with hands, not with a bite, but with your hands or your assistant's hands. Hold it in place throughout the entire process. There could be a little more care on this particular video holding it in place, but there are already a couple of pins, one on the left, one on the right. And then once all the sites are drilled, all the pins are in, the fixation base is set, and then the pin guide is removed. And that is going to expose the teeth and the bone that's to be removed. Now notice this is, so on that last video, you'll see that there was just finger pressure to put the pins in. And that surgery went very well. That was Dr. Isaac Towell. And I'm pretty sure on one of those sites, he did use a mallet. On this case, this is Dr. Boyce, and he is seating the fixation base and pin guide, and he places a pin, oops, dropped it, found it, and put, oh, don't poke yourself with the glove. Pushes it in, you can see almost all the way, and then taps it into place. So sometimes you'll find that tapping is easy. Sometimes you'll find tapping is needed on every site. Sometimes you'll find tapping is very aggressive. You want to kind of find your balance. It's pretty uncomfortable for patients, especially if they're awake. Drill another site, really just a repeat of before. Site is drilled, place the pin, use a surgical mallet, tap, 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 and then off you go. Pin guide comes off, and then just to show in the full use of the pin guide and fixation base, we'll just kind of follow just the rest of this video here for just a few seconds about what happens after. Teeth are extracted, bone is reduced. Different doctors use different tools. I was not going to make this too much of a surgical series, but some doctors use a surgical saw. Some use burrs, rongiers, piezo. Kind of chuckle. You choose your weapon. There are just many, many options. So you reduce the bone down to the level of the fixation base, even with the fixation base. This doesn't have a lingual aspect. And so when you're basically looking down on the patient while they're lying supine, you can visually see that you've reduced enough bone. And then with a gloved finger, you can also pass the finger from the fixation base over to the bone and be sure that it's reduced enough. It's kind of a feel as you go and visual as you go. And we'll show example tomorrow with the carrier guide, how you confirm that there's enough bone reduced to move forward. So that was all dentate pin guide fixation base. Let's talk a little bit about edentulous. So edentulous is different. The pin guide is not made just on the teeth. The pin guide is made as a duplicate of the patient's existing denture. And if you've been involved with guided surgery, edentulous guided surgery, you'll know the protocols. But the protocols are very simple. A patient has hopefully an existing denture. If it does not fit very well, you do a hard reline. As we talked yesterday, if you have a soft reline, you could also do another soft reline and use a green or blue mousse. But the important thing is that the denture fits perfectly and that the occlusion is perfect. Teeth don't necessarily have to be in the perfect position if it's a poorly made a denture as far as tooth position, but the bite needs to be right, the vertical needs to be right, and it must fit, because it becomes the pin guide, literally becomes the pin guide. This is the same case left and right. One's the occlusal view, one's the lingual view. This is the patient's denture. We just simply digitally added the components on it to lock into the fixation base. One thing I did mention here is that the patient is in occlusion when drilling the facial pins. And we'll go through a little video of how that works. If the opposing patient has a full complement of teeth, we may not use this trick here. The denture pin guide will just simply fit the opposing teeth just like it did when it was a denture. And that's how you hold the denture in, the pin guide in. You seat it, put the patient in occlusion, hold the patient in occlusion, and drill. If the patient is in this situation, missing many teeth, and the bite is not repeatable with the denture, then we will integrate the opposing teeth into the pin guide. So these are just negatives of the teeth, and you will simply seat and then hold the patient together. If it's a double edentulous, this is kind of a neat trick we developed. Both pin guides would go in at the same time. And on the tooth side of the maxillary denture, we'll have basically a negative plastic bite that accepts the lower pin guide. So they're assembled, tried in, removed, combined with the fixation bases, and then they are both seated at the same time. That's one option. We'll talk about a couple different options, but you would essentially deliver both pin guides at the same time with their fixation bases and just drill and pin everything at the same time. More notes on this. Right. So one thing that's important is the bullet point number 3. If in a double edentulous, which these are about the most rare cases we do, so I won't spend too much time on it. But if you sent in patients' dentures as dual scans, and then we changed the scheme, we did a setup, we changed plane of occlusion, we changed a tooth shape and size, you definitely want to use both pin guides at the same time, as opposed to using the patient's existing denture in the lower and the pin guide on the upper. They just won't fit together right. So you want to insert both pin guides. Just briefly, we talked about the records, but the records for an edentulous or double edentulous is a dual scan with markers with well-fitting dentures. Happy to answer any questions or help anybody with that at any time, of course. This is the flow of an edentulous case. Patient has well-fitting dentures, you do a dual scan, the middle is what shows up on our screen, and we print these for articulation, but then we also use a digital file to do a setup, and then we fabricate the dual arch pin guides. That's the flow. Let's watch a double edentulous arch in action. This was with Dr. Peck and with Dr. Isaac Towell, and it was a really well done case. In fact, the referring doctor spent a great deal of time on setups, tooth position, denture fit. We did a couple of try-ins. The dentures were just perfect. And because they were perfect, we could or could not, did or did not, we had the option of using either the maxillary pin guide and the patient's existing denture, or using both pin guides. Now, in this case, the doctor, because these teeth did not change, the pin guide, the denture stayed in the mouth. It's a little bit easier to seat the denture than it is a pin guide. So we doctored the maxillary arch first. Hope that's not too confusing. So with an edentulous case, the pin guide is tried in. You make sure it fits the teeth. You make sure it fits the tissue. There's no rock. It's a perfect intimate fit, just like the denture fit. It's removed and tried in with the metal. Probably some pain here. The patient would already have been anesthetized or sleeping. All right, so try it in. Fits perfect. Great. And let me just stop the video here. So there are a couple ways to go about this, about the reflection of the tissue. Often, the doctor will make a crestal incision right down the middle of the crest and then lay the labial flap forward and leave the entire lingual flap and part of the ridge. The reason is because the pin guide still needs to be tissue supported. It's not a bone supported guide like most other systems on the market for these types of cases. It's tissue supported. This case, this doctor and many other doctors use more of a labial incision so that there is a lot of support for the denture, and then, excuse me, and then the stitching is a little bit more in the anterior, but you have a lot more support. There's a few other reasons why you take this technique. Really don't want to go into all the details about it, but I think a labial flap really works well. Also, some of these edentulous surgeries do not require any bone reduction. And if you do not require bone reduction, then you can either not flap at all, or you can do this type of flap that you see here, just lay it back, but you can do it while the metal is in the mouth. So there's options, and I'm going to be off in the weeds of all the different types of ways to do a surgery for edentulous, but this is the most common way. Labial reflection is made, and then the denture is reintroduced, sitting on the palate and on the ridge. It's patient is held together firmly, like literally holding the top of the head and the chin together, and you drill and seat. This doctor likes to use the handpiece to twist the pins in because they have a little hex on them and it kind of breaks down the tension if you're twisting. All seated, right? Another site, and then it's removed, and then a lingual flap. Edentulous case with a little bit of bone reduction. So the flap can be extensive, but frankly, in a lot of these cases, you don't really have to make an extensive lingual flap. It's just a little bit of bone reduction. Right, and then just like every case, the bone is reduced flat. Well, maybe the bone reduction is a little more excessive than I remember. And then the carrier guide is seated, and as long as the carrier guide is passive, which we'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow, then you know the bone is reduced enough. Okay. So that was edentulous. Let's go through some troubleshooting. Fit. We talked about this a little bit before, but the fit of the pin guide dictates the surgery. If the pin guide is off, the fixation base is off. If the fixation base is off, the bone reduction, the implants, the prosthetic, the bite, the experience is off. We do not want that experience. We want the experience to be excellent. So be sure the pin guide fits. Again, this is the same image as before. This is okay. You'll notice on the contralateral side that you have the same intimate fit with the incisal edge and with the facial. If there is, if it rocks, or if you find there's a little bit of a gap, treat it like a splint, treat it like any other item that you would adjust into place, a denture, a partial use indicator, until it seats. Perhaps the first case or two that you do, have the patient in early, try it in, make sure it fits well, make sure you're comfortable with it, adjust it until it fully seats. But pretty much guarantee the pin guide is not going to be off so much that a little bit of adjustment will fix it. These cases have gone through all the exercises of the toughest cases we do to make sure that that the fit's going to be right. Now, one thing you want to notice is this last item here. Very important, probably should have put it in red, but on the surgery mat, pardon me, instructions that we send is going to indicate if you need to extract some teeth before the pin guide goes in. If the patient has significant malocclusion, then you may have to extract a tooth or two or more in order for the pin guide to seat. That's okay. We do this on many, many surgeries, large percentage of them. So just be sure to watch out for that on the surgery mat. We talked about this in the records program. If the patient has all mobile teeth, would probably go a little different direction with edentulating the patient before we start with any kind of chrome procedures. But if the patient still has some remaining ankylosed teeth, let's use them. Let's extract the loose ones if needed. The malocclusion tooth, the tooth down here, we remove these teeth and then move forward with the case. Again, if teeth need to be extracted first, it will be noted on the surgery mat and the records, and that will be discussed in the meeting. Now, there was a case or two where the teeth were actually extracted before the pin guide went in the mouth. That's kind of a big oops. Hope that doesn't happen to anyone here. But the two times that I know of, we were in the room and we said, put the teeth back in the sockets, seat the pin guide, and off we go. Both were a good experience. But needless to say, the pin guide sits on the teeth, so don't extract them first. I'll just quickly go through this. The pin guide will fit the model, will fit the mouth. If it is clearly not fitting, use indicator. We kind of went through that part. We are going to contact you if we see any issues with models, quality, warping from digital impressions, that kind of thing. You'll hear from us. If the patient has had some dental work between the records and now, those teeth, if their crowns or fillings, for some reason they had that kind of work done, those teeth can be extracted, or you can just remount the inside of the pin guide in those areas. You always want to make sure that the pin guide is not being held up by vestibular tissue. That can certainly happen. If so, anesthetize the patient, reflect the tissue, and back to business. There's no other real good way of making sure that pin guide fits other than get the tissue out of the way. And then again, edentulous, you're going to treat it just like a denture. When we send these cases, we send what's called a surgery mat, and it will have an image. I'll show you an image of a surgery mat here in just a second, but it will have an image of how the metal and the bone interact, the floating technology part of it. And this isn't the best picture to show you, but if you were to look at this patient from an occlusal view, the relationship in the mouth is going to be the same relationship as in the mouth. Same thing. So you can, if you detect that your fixation base for some reason looks closer on one side than another during surgery, yes, there's an issue. And that could mean a couple of solutions. And we can talk about those solutions. I'll just mention one. That could be pulling the fixation base back out a little bit in those tight areas, and then wedging it, part of a cotton roll, that kind of thing to stabilize it. But the most important thing is put the fixation base in the right place and be very cautious during the procedures. When using the chrome locks and adding components to it, be very careful with it. This kind of situation would only happen in the maxilla if there was a very low density of bone, which is why we always want to do a solid tap with the pins, with most of the pins. You can see here on the notes, this is our surgery mat. This is what we send out to every surgery. This goes up on the cabinet or up on the wall. We can even send you a JPEG. You could put it on your screen. This gives you, and we'll talk about this more in the next program, but this gives you the sequencing, gives you the images, the pan. It even has a QR code here with a how-to. But here is the picture we showed in the previous slide. This will show you the relationship of the fixation base to the bone. Right there. A little more troubleshooting. Seen this where I always kind of posted a funny question, what is this? What could this possibly be? Well, this was a pin that was a drill that went through the root prior to extraction. The notes on the surgery mat said, extract tooth number, whatever it was, 23 first, 24 first, but it was still in. It's not the end of the day, but it will lock the pin in when it lock the tooth in when you try to extract. So be sure to extract first prior to drilling. And often pins go through socket sites. It's very common. Often we don't have an option. We're putting 4, 5, 6, 8 implants sometimes in these cases in the maxilla, and then we have the chrome locks, and then we have pins, and we have sockets. And so we have to find places, and often they go through the socket. So it's very important. You can see right here, you can see a pin that's actually going through the socket. There's actually one right here too. Can barely see it. So very important protocol. Mute. And this is a case of that's an actual tooth here. This was in one of our training centers. We have a training center down in actually a very nice part of southern Mexico. Forgive me, but this here, this will have to be removed before the pin guide goes in. You can see here, it's the other image of it. So just be careful of that. That is the Fixation Base Carrier Guide program. I want to thank everyone for attending. If you want to stay on, I'm going to go through a complete surgery after we do a Q&A, and after I just briefly show you here, Facebook, join our Facebook. We have almost no marketing on the Facebook. It's a purely educational platform. Chrome Guided Smile. We do have courses that we post on there. That would be about the only advertising you would see, other than perhaps product recommendations. Tomorrow's program is the next phase, the osteotomy guide and the carrier guide. Lots of really good information about that, so we know how to put the implants in and how to load the prosthetics. So I'd be happy to take some questions, and then stick around. We'll go through start to finish on a really nice case we did with a local doctor. Good to get the patient in before the surgery, try in the guide so a large appointment is not wasted. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Glenn. I totally agree. Yeah, if you want to take the time to have the patient come in. A doctor wants to see the recording of these. These are on our webpage. Go to Chrome, drop down to education, and all of our videos are on there, including yesterday's, and today's will be on there by tomorrow. Question, what are your recommendations for a situation where extensive bone reduction is needed in the maxilla in regards to working around the nasopalatine neurovascular bundle? Are clinicians moving the bundle towards the palatine and reducing the bone carefully around it? I noticed in one of your plans you shared earlier, it appeared as though several millimeters had been taken down around it. Well, that's a great question. And that of course is what I was bringing up with plastic versus metal. And I think metal can help with many of these cases, a minimal reduction. But when you have extensive reduction, you have two options. One is we have a product called Chrome Natural, where you can deliver crown and bridge. So if you know that it's going to be extensive and you don't want to deliver that much, but you need it for the smile line or prosthetics and so forth, you can always deliver a crown and bridge prosthetic, and we'll have a program on that coming up. It's still in beta, but it's coming out of beta very soon. That's one answer. I'm going to give you a better answer. It kind of varies from doctor to doctor. I mean, some doctors just sever it, but they know that there's long-term numbness. There are issues with that. I think that with our system, you can adjust the bone and really lay a minimal flap to no flap. But otherwise, yes, doctor, I just see doctors severing the nerve bundle, filleting the palate, and saying, hey, these are the consequences of doing these types of surgeries. I'd love to see a concrete solution, but I think the two that I mentioned, I think help a lot tremendously. This is more of a surgical question. If pins are transcortical, are we worried about any surgery complications on mandibular arch, lingual artery, and nerve? We are very careful of where we place them. And I know that during an evaluation, during a cone beam, you can't always see everything perfectly. Have yet to see an issue of the pin causing that damage. That damage is generally from other reasons involving the implants or the bone reduction. Have not seen that problem with pins. Answer to the question: don't remove bundle. You can have bleeding issues. Just reflect enough so that you can reduce the bone. Exactly. Thank you, MacBook Pro. Thank you very much. I totally agree. If you can avoid it at all costs, do avoid it. If you remove the NPB, make sure you have cautery. Yeah, exactly. Have to be careful with bleeding. Thank you very much, Britt Burles.